This podcast is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the business psychos and does not reflect the viewpoints of their current or former employers or clients. Thank you.
It's the business psychos, and today we're gonna talk it out. The podcast about what execs shouldn't talk about. Connecting executives and those who aspire. We're here to have a conversation, yeah, we're gonna light the fire. It's the business psychos. Yeah. The business psychos.
I'm learning that my hair is actually wavy, apparently. So it's helping me relax about the fact that it always looks like it's kind of, a little unkempt.
I'm getting a lot of ads on social about, do you have wavy hair? If this is happening, you might have wavy hair. I'm getting just suddenly tons of ads about that. That's weird.
Really?
I think we're not alone. I think that's what's...
Wow. Yeah, maybe it's like a whole thing that's happening.
It's also
I'm here
humid
for it.
as F here in the Northeast. This is like week 3 of just suffocating humidity levels, and then they're like, it's gonna rain, and then it's like, oh, it'll be gone, and then it's right back. It's been a very, very humid summer here in New York anyway.
Yeah, I was, as I'd mentioned earlier, I was on a Zoom call this morning and the camera was off for whatever reason. I don't know why. And I was like, and I turned it on, and I hadn't sort of like powdered my nose and prepped myself, and it was a shock to all involved. It was like I looked like some subterranean earth dweller who would like sort of come out to, it's like we talked about what was that, like Lord of the Rings earlier. I was like I had Gollum energy right off.
I think we're gonna have an episode on like Zoom era work.
Oh.
Like, I mean, in the 80s, all these things that we're talking about, these dynamics of Zoom just didn't happen years ago. Including some etiquette and questions about appropriateness. We should definitely do some vignettes. I had someone do something on a Zoom call where I'm like, is this normal now? Am I just old? Is this a generational thing? And I'm like, no.
What did they do?
They were just blowing giant vape smoke into the Zoom lens.
I'm going to go with no. Don't do that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was, was it during COVID? It was probably not in the heart of COVID where we were all like, rocking back and forth. But it was in you can still work from home before anything bad happened. And I didn't care. People were wearing t-shirts. This person was wearing a t-shirt and like a hat. I don't know, the hat might have been backwards. You catching the vibe.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna say it has like Mad Men energy. It's like your highball and your cigarette. It's like, no, dude, this is
no. I would have been okay. I have actually caught some people with like it gone on and off of they come on after a quick second and there's a little bit of trail of vape. I've caught that. I don't mind that. I don't mind a Don Draper side smoke. This was intentional right into the camera, and it was my town hall team meeting, so it was like a lot of Zoom box, a lot of little pictures in the Zoom box, and so I wasn't focusing on them. To be fair, it was they probably thought they were anonymous because there were so many people on the call, but also or maybe they thought their camera was off, or I don't even know. Yeah. But I had to check myself. It's like if this was a generational thing, but no, I think you're right. It's a hard no. It's not okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit, and also you don't know if they're like what they're smoking. I mean, not to be like it's kind of like what's going on here. Yeah, I'm gonna say hard pass on that, but open to be having my mind changed.
Okay, yeah, we'll do an audience poll whether it's okay.
We'll have an audience poll. So, Mary, you have been having some great conversations lately with some of the folks that are our listeners.
Yeah, I'm so grateful. We have some, people are hitting us up, DMs. Also, our email, which will remind everybody in the comments of this episode that we have an email if you want to get in touch with us, and we've got a bunch of socials. So this one comes in. This was an email that came in from our audience, and it came from CT_Todd. And he writes, Psychos, love the show. The first episode I heard was authenticity. It hit the mark for me, so I continued on with your shows on shame. I work for a brokerage firm, and I guess this show hit too close to the mark because while I really enjoyed listening to them, I felt later like it maybe stirred up a little too much. My work culture is very intense and competitive. I planned on going back to binge the rest of your shows, but felt like it might make dealing with my job more difficult. I know this is a cop-out, and I'm probably in denial of just how bad it is, but I have 2 small kids, and the money is too good to consider leaving right now. I wanted to share the feedback and encourage you to keep going. I expect at some point down the line, I'll be at a different position, but for now, I'm staying plugged into the matrix. So like, wow. So first of all, thanks to, and he's probably not listening to this, but thanks to CT Todd. Katie, Todd's it brought up all sorts of feelings for me. I think obviously from a selfish point of view, I was disappointed that we were going to lose Todd, at least for now. And then when I stopped thinking about myself, I made myself imagine where Todd is emotionally. And then I felt myself being flooded with compassion and sadness, really, for him. Because I certainly have had, my share of jobs where, you had to expend a lot of emotional energy to get through the day sometimes. And so I guess my reflection here is that sometimes our minds will help protect us from things that we're not yet ready to deal with. And I think, Todd, when you do listen to this or watch us, you look and you're looking back at where you were, you had the insight to reflect that, you're battling an internal conflict in regards to having a well-paying job that might not be great for you emotionally. And that by letting that awareness come out into consciousness, it could potentially put your ability to earn money you need for your family at risk. So listen, we all need to do what we need to do in life sometimes. I respect Todd for his resiliency, and I hope for him a future where things aren't quite as hard. What do you think, Katie?
Well, the first thought that comes to my mind is I get it. I have been there. I spent swaths of my career and my life, like pretty, I guess the term that is now commonly used is dissociated. And part of the thing was that the intensity that I was working at, I couldn't stop because when I did, it revealed just how painful it was to be working the way I was. So I wouldn't stop. So I would just keep going. And so even like taking vacations where people would say, you really need to take a vacation, you're working too hard. I knew that the reveal on that was that it just created too much internal angst. So the idea was just sort of to double down and keep going. But, I had an end goal in mind, which was to make myself, financially independent. And for folks who are supporting families, I think that there really is a reality to the fact that, I've always liked the saying, you do what you have to do until you can do what you want to do. And I think that part of this is that it's like, okay, if that's where you're at right now, and you're like, I can't right now. And I get it. I get that so deeply, that at least you have clarity about what your end game is. So if there's the sense that you're just so deep in this and there's no getting out, I think that is what leads to some of the despair. I mean, you talked about the founder of Fandango a couple of weeks ago, and I'd listened to another podcast about a man who'd worked at General Dynamics. They disguised the company that he worked at, who had been a very high contributing person who'd given up in despair and, unalived himself very sadly. And I think that a lot of that has to do with losing perspective and context about what's happening and what you're doing, which is so easy to happen. I'm not saying this because I'm like, it's foolish to do it. I'm saying because it's so easy for that to happen. So my thing is if you are one of the people that is saying, okay, I'm not really ready to broach these types of topics yet, because it's like opening up kind of, sort of like something that doesn't feel particularly safe to me right now, is to just, if anything, before you go back in, to make create some type of sensibility about, okay, I'm going to go back in, but this is for the purpose of XYZ. And as Todd, talking about like supporting the family, I think that, and even supporting a person's goals about, developing a nest egg, developing, putting something together to build a business, to create some security, to be able to like do something, whatever, but yeah. That's, I think it's totally understandable. And I wish, this is one of those times I wish that we had like audience interaction, because I'd really want to hear how folks respond to that and how they feel about it.
Yeah, I think this is one, and I think there's a number of reasons why people may or may not be as visible on our socials, because some folks feel like, maybe you could connect who it is, and there's a more protectiveness about it. But I totally agree. I would love to hear what others are saying and how they experience that story about Todd and how they feel about it. The decision to confront difficult truths, especially about your professional situation, is really yours alone. But to your point, what you were just speaking about, Katie, it's like the only thing I would say is don't ever allow it to come between you and your loved one's health and wellness. So, it's like, oh, I'm going to work at this brokerage firm. The kids I just need their college money, or I just need to pay off the house, or I just need to, okay, understandable. But if you start having dark thoughts, or you're not sleeping, your behavior, it's like when things start to turn. And we talked on another episode about having like personal health metrics that you kind of define for yourself. Like, you need to know there's a point where none of it's worth it. I get that you want to pay off your house and the kids want to go to college, but when it's about your health, your mental health, your physical health, and I mean that you can't get back. That's like game over. So, I applaud Todd. I also don't want us to lose listeners. And I guess on some level, I'm grateful that there's something in what we're talking about that is starting to. That I think this is the other side of people's reaction to the show, Katie. That they were like, "Wow, this is stuff we're grappling with and talking about, and it's on my mind." But maybe for those folks, it's in a little bit more of a conscious space that they're able to kind of play around with, or their job situation isn't that dire. But interesting stuff.
Yeah, and I think one final note I'd have on this, as far as for folks who are grappling with this absorption, is to be aware of the absorption. And, and I think one of the things that also can get you is the rationalization process of making the job really important. And something where behaviors and beliefs where you start to really like magnify the reason that you're doing this stuff to try to like justify it. And if you can, I mean, this is really hard. I mean, this is all, I really sympathize. But if you can, and this goes to a lot of the things we're talking about this season, if you can compartmentalize to the best of your ability and keep things fenced in so that your other, like the other facets of your identity are well, at least like stabilized and not completely like left to, wither, that, like your relationships with people, your relationship with yourself, your feelings, your ability to have emotions, your ability to have a sense of the things that you care about, the things that bring you joy, like as far as like creative things and the books you like to read and stuff like that. As long, when all of that stuff is crowded out, I think that's one of the things that is just being really aware of kind of what's happening isn't a representation of reality. It's a coping mechanism that's kind of gone off the rails. So yeah, thanks for sharing to the listener and also everyone else we'd love to hear. So last season, we did a show on authenticity where we argued against being genuine at work. While learning and manifesting our true nature, is a goal in personal development, it doesn't mean that the version of yourself that's fully actualized should be the one that goes to work. So check out episode 8 and learn a little bit more about that discussion. So if your true self doesn't go to work, who does? That's where your work persona comes in. So don't have one yet, or not sure if you do, no worries, we've got you covered. Let's talk about creating your own persona, a professional persona to deploy on your behalf each and every workday. So protect yourself, navigate the game, and achieve your career goals. We're talking about creating work personas.
Hang tight, psychos. We'll be right back.
The definition of persona is the aspect of someone's character that is presented to or perceived by others. The great psychologist Carl Jung referred to the persona as an individual's social facade, or front, which reflects the role that the individual is playing in a certain context. As human beings, it's natural to have adaptive personas which change with the environment we're in. One might play the role of mother to your children, but also have personas for being a wife, daughter, sister, friend, boss, or coworker. Each of these roles requires different aspects of who you are and also have different norms associated with them. For example, maybe you and your friends from college go away for a guys' weekend every year. I'll bet you're going to act differently with them than with your kids when you get home. Personas are like outfits. They are front-facing, situationally appropriate, and the outer layer which sits between your real self and the rest of the world. Consider the different roles you play in your life and how you might bring forward or hide different aspects of yourself given different situations. Now imagine yourself sitting at your desk, signing into a Zoom call with your boss. Which persona participates? Is this something you think about, or does it just happen naturally? Have you ever found yourself oversharing at work, or maybe disclosing something that you felt uncomfortable about afterwards? But people don't really talk about this. It seems disingenuous or even manipulative, but it's actually something we all do very naturally and often without much conscious intervention. There's an opportunity here for you to proactively design your professional avatar and make a conscious decision to embody this persona during work hours. This will make you more effective and even mitigate some risks. Now, you're probably saying, Mary, I have 23 years experience and I'm an expert in blah, blah, blah. How can creating a fake work persona make me even more effective? The reason why is that experience and expertise are only part of the equation to career success. Also important is your professional appearance and behavior, and that's where persona comes in. In my advisory business, I coach executives, many of whom are mid-career and have been recently surprised by a layoff, reorganization, or who have hit a wall in their ascension up the ladder. In some cases, what was holding these smart people back was more about personal behavior and how they were perceived than their experience or know-how. Your professional avatar is a key part of your brand, which is critical to both short-term and long-term success. It's also the security perimeter between your personal life and the gig that pays you money to support it.
Speaking from my direct personal experience, I'm very comfortable and informal, but even that is its own persona. Now, as an executive and as a woman, it's important to establish authority and not leave yourself open to some very specific vulnerabilities, specifically the ones that relate to conveying the weakness of needing to be liked. it's actually a bit of relief to me and comes surprisingly naturally to be direct and relatively flat in my affect. The part I need to manage is the response to it. So when people see me as the big boss, sometimes it's hard to adjust and for me to navigate because I'm not particularly keen on authority and the necessary distance it creates in human connection. So I believe that many dynamics in sales benefit from authenticity and even disclosure that lacks a certain amount of polish. It signals honesty, but at a certain point, establishing trust with a client involves showing them that you take the task at hand seriously and have the ability to deliver and the maturity to take accountability if things go wrong. You have to know the difference between what opens a door and what gets a deal done. So one example is a rep I used to work with early in my career as a district trainer. And what that means is I was essentially a peer tasked with developing other reps in my region. So there was this guy who was like super silly and lovable. What should we call him, Mary?
Wow, that's so hard. Chris, let's call him Chris.
Yeah. The doctor's offices loved Chris, but they didn't respect him. They called him the candy man because he brought them snacks, but they wouldn't let him see the doctor. So he'd be hanging out in the back office, gossiping with the staff, but rarely talking to the prescribers. And when I gave him the feedback that he needed to start leveraging his relationships and asking for access to the doctors, after all, that was the job, he said to me, "Do you know what they call you? Pushy Katie." And I think he expected me to be upset about that. And at the time, it probably did hurt my feelings. But my response had been, at the time, I said, "Chris, do you know what they call me on my team? Number one." And that was the reason. And that's the reason I was in the trainer position. So I don't remember much about him beyond that, but what I've observed over the years is that when you present as kind of the friendly clown or act overtly flirty, just because it's comfortable for you, because it feels kind of like right and natural, it's hard to walk that back, to be taken seriously when it matters. There's quite a bit of nuance to this, granted, but ultimately it's pretty straightforward.
Wow, that's a great example. I love it. I've definitely known a few Mr. Clowns, for a few Chris's in my time.
The candy man.
Yeah. And by the way, I've actually given candy at work, so this like my right mind, I'm like trying to respond, but I'm also trying to like, all right, I'm gonna put that to the side and deal with that later. But your feedback that funny and silly or whatever can go too far and impact credibility. And I'm kind of picturing him bringing the office managers and the nurses candy and like envisioning this as like a fawning behavior, and
Yeah.
how maybe he thought that this would be received just be nice. Maybe like that was his attempt at a persona of sorts. And like there's like almost a childlike quality to it in a way, right? Like giving friends candy and small gifts. Like maybe the schoolyard lesson for him had never been adapted to a more professional context. And it's interesting how he responded to you, because it gives a clue to his motivation and conflict, right? He's like, well, see, the office staff like perceived you as pushy, which clearly scares the hell out of him, right? Like he needs the access, but he lacks the confidence to confront the discomfort of another perceiving him as too assertive, of being like the bad boy in a way, right? So he's like providing treats to be liked and as an offer of exchange for what he really wants. That's an awesome, awesome story.
That is so perceptive of you, by the way, because I think that's it that mirrors itself, over so many examples throughout my career as watching folks really struggle with the balance between needing to be liked, which is something that extends outside of your professional needs, but like winds up overlapping with the ability to get things done. And in sales, you're not a customer service person. You're performing a very specific need.
And by the way, if we can continue, because this was such an awesome example, I have so many other things like percolating in my mind. But so while I have been candy in the workplace.
So have I.
But also I remember I was new to a big financial institution where there was a lot of history, and I kind of knew the history, but I was like the new person. And I remember our first leadership team meeting, I brought like a giant box of croissants. And I think that also comes from maybe there's a wanting to be liked in it, but it was also this nurturing. It was like this, which I think as women, we can sometimes naturally fall, and not it's not a bad thing, right? Nurturing is a good thing, but not necessarily in that role at that job in that context was like, oh, I want to feed everyone. It's like, it's a morning meeting. And so like, look what I picked up on the way. And I think as women, especially women in certain positions and at certain levels of their career, you need to be careful about that, because we're kind of fighting against those, being automatically identified as that. And what's coming to mind is a story one of our audience members told me about coaching a woman who, would respond to, oh, I'll take notes. Like when there wasn't an assistant in the room or something like that, or can you get the door? Can you do whatever? And just like, you want to be liked, you want to be helpful, and it's great to be liked and helpful and a team player. You just need to be careful where it's coming from and what it might telegraph to others.
Yeah, it's so much about what it means to make a strong first impression, right? So it's like you bring the croissants because there's like, this sense of I want to like walk in the room and immediately sort of make a positive impression. And I think that this is where a lot of socialization winds up actually working against us as women. I will say that the thing about taking notes, I will patently say no. Like I will absolutely.
I do. I hate taking notes.
I actually like taking them, but I won't signal the fact that I'm like being sort of playing these like sort of conventional, submissive, roles. Even things like, well, you pick that up. I won't. It's like,
no.
It's just like, even if there's something that's like, there's trash in the room that would be like really easy to pick up and throw in the trash. And no, opening door that no. And it's uncomfortable, but it's like, this goes back to the thing that's like, well, okay, so in the language and the sort of parlance or whatever of business, it's transaction. And it really has to do with, making a strong impression is, a lot of times it's being blank faced. Like it's literally the power of what that does to people psychologically is not giving them anything to read. And how that impacts how they interface with you, and like it kind of surfaces their own like projection and their own issues, but it doesn't really give them very much to chew on. So you hold the power for being able to manage the dynamic. So yeah.
And this is what we're talking about today, personas. This is why this isn't easy to do, right? This is not easy. Everything you're saying, absolutely brilliant, but like that's not, we're automatically, it's just, you're going to just, do these things. And
that harks back to sort of what I referred to earlier, which was saying that it's like, I can do it, but it's still hard to manage the response to it. So I still feel the fact that it's a departure from how I like to typically interact in my life. But I also understand, to our point of playing the persona, the importance, especially as you begin to have ascend in an organization, and it's really ultimately a responsibility to be able to do the best for your organization, your team, your people. So you need to have the respect. You need to have a little bit of the fear of, within the organization for you, so you can get things done. It's that thing where it's like, yeah, first you do it, and then you have to deal with the fact that the response isn't like friendly, like, thanks for the croissant. It's like it can be a very cold exit from that meeting room when you're doing it right.
Last thing, no one had any of the croissants. There wasn't one person not one person ate a croissant.
Ooh,
I probably brought 12 of them. Ooh, I want a croissant. I want a cronut. That's what I really want.
I want like 12 croissants right now.
Hang tight, psychos. We'll be right back.
I view careers as taking part in 3 acts. 1, discovery and experience. 2, expertise development. And 3, adaptive value creation. I'll get into all of that later on, but I wanted to mention it relative to a brilliant mentor of mine who was in the 3rd act of his career when I had the luck of working for him. The context is important. This man, who I'll call Bob, held a C-suite role at a large global firm. He was both effective and likable. Being in the 3rd act, his job was to be adaptive to any and all change and to create value for the firm beyond his comp. The day I accepted a job working for Bob, he called me into his office to shake my hand and wish me luck. I recall I said something to him, a compliment or something about how his employees were receiving something he had recently talked about. And he smiled and said, "Mary, as you progress in your career, the more people will tell you how great you are." There was a vulnerability in the moment, though I can't point to exactly how I knew this. I just felt it. I've held COO or chief of staff roles for most of my career. The primary skills in these roles have been discretion, loyalty, and the ability to be the architect and executor of my leader's most important strategic initiatives. These roles required me to work formally on behalf of my leader and speak or write or represent them as they would themselves. Bob was charismatic and likable. He gave off a really warm, genuine vibe. When I interacted with him, I felt seen, valued, cared for, and respected. I saw a kind, intelligent, and strong man. But I was also very conscious that I was interacting with Bob's work avatar and not Bob himself. I felt as though Bob was intentional in creating this persona and that it had served him very, very well. If you could use AI to design an ideal boss, Bob would come pretty close. Now, I did see him react pretty intensely to things now and then, but at his level, it was absolutely necessary. He did not suffer fools, a style which telegraphed his strengths as much as it inspired people to do their best for him. Persona isn't just your expertise or experience. Now, I'm not suggesting that the good parts of Bob's persona were opposite to his real self. Personas aren't the opposite of your true nature. They are inspired by the best and most appropriate aspects of yourself and others, curated into a singular whole. Its construct developed to serve your best interests.
That last couple of sentences, I feel like, could just be the entire podcast episode. For me, this example that you've provided, it points back to the role of emotional regulation and even self-awareness in professional development. Specifically, that flattery really only works on people who don't have conscious command of themselves. And it works especially well on people who demand or crave validation. So when staff compliment or flatter me, the more experienced I become, the less susceptible I am to the manipulation. But it's a work in progress. And in a previous episode, I talked about an example where I was only able to see the impact in hindsight. But in the example you provided, Bob returns the serve without creating any embarrassment and establishes his command in a brilliant and polished manner. I think there's a subconscious comfort to knowing someone has the ability to remain kind, clear-headed, and in control, when that person is your boss.
And we'll be right back.
Right. There's the expression dress for the job you want. And as previously discussed, I have a penchant for athleisure, which flies in opposition of my ability and desire to make a larger impact in the organizations where I work. So by extension, I would say act for the job you want, which is a relative of fake it till you make it. There is value in formalizing the separation between your personal and professional lives. It's a good thing to be able to take a break from these different aspects of our lives that have different demands and requirements. When it all blends together, there's no separation and sustainability becomes impossible. And I think this kind of calls back to what we talked about in the first part of this episode with the reader or the listener input. So your performance will be evaluated on how effective you are in your role. But this includes your persona. You'll be rewarded for playing the role your profession values. So when you accept a role, it is no different than being cast as the lead character in a new movie. Your director, producer, and writer have a character in mind for you to play. And this might be very explicit to you, or you may need to flesh it out. But you are being paid to be that character. This benefits you for reasons we've discussed on the show before. Work isn't family, and your colleagues can be friendly, but they aren't your friends. So not only will you disappoint expectations, bringing your so-called real self to work, but you may also actually put your mental health at the risk by doing so.
Your appearance and behavior are a critical part of your professional brand. The persona you design for yourself should evolve throughout your career. Here's a high-level overview of the 3 acts and some of the persona qualities you might want to incorporate into your avatar. Act 1, all about discovery and experience building. The persona here is one of excitement, energy, gratitude, and curiosity. You know you have a lot to learn, and you're grateful for any and all opportunities to do so. You seek mentorship and feedback because you value insight into yourself and are eager to progress to Act 2, which is all about expertise building. Now, there's 8 expertise areas to familiarize yourself with during the stage. I'm going to run through them quickly. Check out the comments for a link to a free download. 1. Domain or industry knowledge. 2. Technical expertise. 3. Knowledge of leadership, which is managing teams, projects, and organizations. 4. Expertise in interpersonal relationships, talking about communication, negotiation, and relationship building. 5. Analytical expertise. 6. Creative expertise. 7. Expertise in strategy development, meaning the ability to create long-term plans, set goals, and achieve objectives. And finally, 8. Cultural expertise, which is the ability to understand and navigate different cultural norms and practices, something which is critical in our interdependent global market. Your persona here continues to be one of curiosity, but also confidence and open-mindedness. The requirements of you in Act 2 of your career will be taxing and dynamic, so humility, adaptability, patience, and resiliency are going to win the day. You'll need to balance your burgeoning competence with the various gaps in knowledge that you will invariably still have. Coming out of this act with well-rounded knowledge across all 8 expertise areas will position you for Act 3. And this is all value creation. In this act, it's not enough to know your stuff. You need to use all of that to demonstrate your ability to create quantifiable value, at least a 2x multiplier of your compensation. At the top of the ladder, you won't be doing as much as influencing. So credibility, competency, cooperation, poise, and servant leader mentality will serve you well. At this level, sometimes the less you say, and often do, at least directly, will convey greater confidence. You let your team's performance speak for itself. Your persona stresses accountability and perseverance. When you reach a certain point in your career, you might decide to make physical changes. A new wardrobe, jewelry, maybe even a new car. These changes impact how others see you, typically as more financially successful. Now think about your behavior. What interpersonal qualities might you change to align to your current role? What about the one you want? Imagine yourself an actor playing you in your dream job and cultivate the persona that aligns to the culture and needs of your organization. Integrate performance feedback into your continuous evaluation and improvement of your persona. If you're open to hearing it, your boss will send you clues about the character they want you to play.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and share with other psychos you know. We'd also love to hear from you, so hit us up on our socials. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook under @BusinessPsychosPod. Bye.